This is complicated.
It was coming, whether we were ready for it or not.
Yeah, I think it's been very complicated.
Legalized edible medical cannabis that's being packaged to look appealing.
The state hasn't issued their regulations, so there's holes in what the state is going to require.
It's a complex matter. We've got growing indoor versus outdoor. The state doesn't have their regulations in place yet, so we don't have that to really go from.
Well, there's cannabinoids, we don't even know what they do yet. CBC has incredible potential, and there's almost no studies on it.
With your first visit, I can get you a choice of free gifts as well. Either a chocolate square, a pre-rolled joint, a lollipop, or a bag of hard candies. And then these are all my indicas.
If you do have a license or a permit, those are the benefits, absolutely, that you don't have to worry, you don't have to hide. If there is a problem, you can work with the police and the law enforcement to try to solve your problem. The greenhouse has gotten torn apart, so that's going to be one of the main things you have out here. You're going to have them strip the roof and oftentimes strip the sides and get it replaced with new material. There are going to be curtains that can basically close up this entire greenhouse so that it's completely dark when we want it to be. And the reason we're doing that is we're manipulating the sunlight and the light that the plants receive, because depending on how much light the cannabis plant receives is going to depend on what stage of growth it's in. So when it's receiving between 15 and 18 hours of light per day, it's going to be in the vegetative state, which means that it's going to be growing leaves, and the stems are going to be getting thicker, and it's going to get bushier and all that. And then when it gets 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness, it's going to be flowering, and it's going to start producing the buds. So that's how a cannabis grower can manipulate their plants to dictate when it's going to grow flowers, when it's going to not grow flowers, how large it's going to get. Most of these greenhouses will probably get between 4 to 5 harvests per year.
This is what we typically give to, like, say, a cancer patient who's having trouble getting out of bed and can't eat a lot.
1996, Proposition 215 passed, and it was decent. It was a good start at regulating the industry, but it wasn't that clear. There was a lot of gray area in it. So for 20 years, we had that proposition, and it was kind of somewhat of a Wild West setting, because a lot of cities and counties just didn't address it. They didn't really pay attention to it. They didn't try to regulate it.
And also what kind of sped up the timeline was that there was state legislation that said about putting the regulations in place at the state that said for the local jurisdictions, if you don't have something in place by March 1st, then you follow the state regulations. It would just be allowed under the state regulations. We wanted to bring forward to get the pulse of the policymakers, the Board of Supervisors. Do you want to prohibit it, or do you want to allow it? And if you want to allow it, we need some time to put together the regulations.
That's when we formed an ad hoc committee, Dave Potter and I, former supervisor, and we brought in a number of county agencies to come in with us to start looking about how we would go about drafting an ordinance that would be comprehensive.
We brought in people from other counties, other jurisdictions that have had marijuana, either growing or dispensaries, and talking to them about kind of some pitfalls that they may have had, to learn from what they had to share with their experience.
And throughout this process, the big concern has just been the shifting laws. While we were developing these regulations, MRSA and AMA both were enacted. That's the Medical Marijuana Regulation Safety Act and the Adult Use Marijuana Act, Prop 64. So with those changing state laws, it definitely impacted where we needed to go, because our regulations have to be at least as strict as the state regulations. And then there's the huge issue of under federal law, marijuana is still a controlled substance. It's not legal. There's something called the Cole Memo, and the Cole Memo basically says we will not interfere with states that have a legitimate medical or adult use marijuana system in place, but it basically sets the stage for how states and local governments must act with regard to marijuana. The Cole Memo sets enforcement priorities for attorney generals, basically to prosecute if those enforcement priorities aren't being met.
When we approached them and said, we believe that we can do this right, and we've found a site, and we want to grow there, that's when the county started realizing, well, there may be others.
they were business people, not your marijuana growers that you typically think of. They were business people that were looking to get into the business of cultivating marijuana, and our county is one, especially with some of the greenhouses going vacant with the demolition of the business of flower growing. It was an ideal spot for people coming in and doing the cultivation business.
So my thought was, let's get growers of cannabis together and try to come in with a single voice to the extent possible, and at least educate the board and try to make change.
Before they invested large sums of money doing it, they wanted to make sure they were doing it right. This is the direction we're going. Will you create an ordinance on it? And at least to give them some assurance. I mean, they felt they were operating in compliance with state law, but we didn't have anything prohibiting or entitling people to grow marijuana in the county.
It's not just the outward appearance of legitimacy that they wanted. They wanted surety that if they're conducting this activity, that they're not being taken away from their families, or nothing else is detrimental that will happen to them.
So that was really the spark in what really got people moving, and really helped our cause to come together and tell them, like, look, this is what the state's saying, we can help you with this, etc.
So that's going to give you more of a high.
No, actually that's going to be the less psychoactive one. That one they call high CBD because it also contains THC, but it's just a higher ratio of CBD.
What the state law does that I thought was brilliant is it leaves a lot of the questions of land use and a lot of questions about licensing up to the local jurisdictions. And they basically say, if you don't want this in your area, you can ban it.
Opinions among the agricultural community are mixed and pretty much diametrically opposed. And some people think it should be treated like any other crop. Other people think we shouldn't allow it at all.
We got quite a few people interested. They all were on the same page when it was, do we regulate ourselves? Or do we work with the county in supporting regulation for this industry, for us? And they said, yes, let's do that.
But it was the industry that came to us that said, we want an ordinance. And so we looked at it, we created one.
We were working with the stakeholders to get an idea of what it is that they were looking at, what they would like, ideally. Then we go back to the ad hoc committee and say, from a staff perspective, which we had staff from various departments, sheriff, district attorney, health, ag commissioner, RMA from land use, tax collector, a lot of people around the table saying, what is it that we think works for Monterey County? So where you have one use permit for the whole of the property, then if you have, say, 5 operations of 22,000 square feet, each one of those 5 has to get a business permit. And that's where we'll do a background check for the operator. We'll look at, from a health perspective, if there's hazardous materials involved, pesticides, those kind of things. That will all be looked at under that business permit. There'll be the initial analysis, and then there will be an annual renewal after that. As long as it doesn't change, we're just checking to make sure everything is still consistent and the same. Then there's the business license, and that's really more for the taxing purpose. Through the tax collector's office will be a business license. Everybody that we've issued a business permit to will be sent an application to fill out for a business license.
More THC to permeate your cell membranes, so you can actually uptake more of the THC in the cannabis. It's typically found in anything from Afghani origin.
This isn't just a simple come in and get your permit over the counter. We have what we call a development review committee. That's all the land use agencies sitting around the table with the applicant when they just at a very initial concept stage. They'll say, here's what I want to do on the property. We'll say, okay, we can move this around or do this different, do that different. Here's how we'd like to address the security. Here's what we think of the design, for being within the area that it is, and help give them direction kind of going forward. But then there's a public process as well. So the use permit will go forward to the Planning Commission, and there will be a public process. It'll be fully vetted.
Mainly, we want to do background checks on the commercial side of it, on who's applying for permits, make sure they go through a background check and, you know, look for things if they have prior drug offenses or felony charges. We certainly don't want those people in the cannabis business here in Monterey County. And also any workers that they employ to tend to these cannabis grows. We want to make sure we don't have felons or especially known narcotics offenders that are working for these businesses.
The first ones in are going to be the examples. And if that goes south, they know that goes south for the whole industry. So these first, uses that are coming in, we're really trying to make sure it's done right. They're working with us in order to make sure that it gets off on the right foot.
The way that the county did it basically is they set it up so that you can pretty much only grow in the Salinas Valley floor, which is where we are. You can only grow off of places like Zabala Road, Spence Road, Potter Road, Encinal Road, all of these places where these greenhouses are located.
Reviewing the environmental effects of the ordinance. You've had existing building, there had been previous greenhouse grows which used water, there was traffic with trucks, so there was a certain baseline of intensity there that we were trying to generally stay within.
But here we go, and they're going to be rebuilding greenhouses, and we'll see all these old dilapidated greenhouses replaced with new structures. Of course, the Agricultural Commissioner is also the sealer of weights and measures. And the other area under our regulatory purview where we will deal with cannabis is weights and measures to protect the cannabis consumer. So if they're selling cannabis with a scale and they're weighing it at their location, that scale has to be registered with our office. We have to test it annually and make sure it's it's accurate. If they're pre-packaging it and selling it over the counter, already weighed, then we still will go in there and make sure that that is properly labeled and the weight is accurate. We're all about equity in the marketplace and protect the consumer and the business. Statewide, I've heard estimates that it could be as much as a $10 billion industry by 2020. Now, if the total value of agriculture in California is around $40 billion, it could be equivalent to, say, 25% of the state's agricultural output. On the nursery side of the industry, a number of our nursery growers have decided that they want to participate in this new opportunity. And they have the greenhouses. Of course, we are only allowing it in greenhouses. So the people that had greenhouses had an advantage there.
Those greenhouses had basically deteriorated. And so now there's an opportunity to come in and redevelop those areas. There's there's money with the marijuana industry to come in and redevelop those properties.
Yeah, I think that people want to be in it for the long haul. We'll have to see how it works out for them. I think you're going to see a number of these new startup businesses are not going to be successful, and they're going to go out of business within a few years. The tax burden is heavy. The cost of operating as a legitimate business are substantial, and I think everyone's thinks this is the new gold rush, but I mean it might turn out that it's really a business where you have to know what you're doing, you have to run an efficient operation, and and have a good market to really make it successful.
People want it to be legitimized. People want their medicine to be tested for pesticides and molds and things like that, but it's all going to come down to economics. It always does. If it's not affordable, because again, another thing to keep in mind is people that legitimately need it for medical reasons, it's not like they get it covered with their insurance. This is all out of pocket that they're spending. So if it's not economical, they're not going to do it. It's just as simple as that.
And we have many nurseries, many greenhouses that have fallen in disrepair, because it's hard to find a niche market that will allow you to continue to operate. So, I mean, this is going to be it for a lot of growers, and even those properties If it has a greenhouse on it now and it can be used for cannabis, it's worth a premium. Recreational takes off and states continue to legalize it. We could have competition from other states too. And we do have a good climate here, good growing conditions, but you can grow it anywhere in a building with the right equipment.
Having permitted infrastructure does allow us to put out a superior product. It's also a very expensive product because of all the expenses, the taxes, the lab testing, the insurance that goes into it. And if we tax our farmers and our stores too much, the whole system could fail. We could lose to the black market.
That these transactions occur around us every day, and there is no community benefit to that if it's in an illicit system. So our thought was, let's make a community benefit out of this, which means raising tax revenue that goes to other things in the community that we need. So if it doesn't appear that we're getting the community benefit that we thought, something may need to be modified.
But most people just grow their cannabis, whether it's outdoor, greenhouse, or indoor, wherever they may be located, and then they simply just go to dispensaries, and they just go. It's kind of like a farmer's market model almost, where you just direct from the grower to the retail side. So they'll go to the dispensaries and they'll show them whatever strains they have, and they'll negotiate on the price and the terms, and then the dispensary will take it and then package it and then sell it. But now how it's going to be looking like, according to the new regulations that are coming out from the state, is they're going to do it a lot like alcohol, where the cultivator will grow it, and then they will either send it to a manufacturer to get extracted or whatnot, or it'll go directly to a distributor. And then the distributor is going to be responsible for quality control. So they'll be sending it off to the testing labs and things like that, and then the distributor will be responsible for sending it to the dispensaries.
So all this will have to work itself out. I mean, it's a grand experiment at this point, and we don't know exactly how it's all going to shake out.
Federally, it's illegal. It's a controlled substance that gets people high, and so your criminals are going to do whatever it